Oh.
Whoa.
Calling Chris Anderson in Toronto, Canada, eh?
Eh?
Good
Hello.
day, eh?
Good day.
Good day?
This is Becca. Never mind. Calling Rick Byer in Chicago.
Oh yeah, I'm here in Chicago. I'm not in Canada, Chris.
Yeah, I
but
noticed.
I'm close. I feel your closeness. You're only what, about 500, 400 miles
Yeah,
away
it's kind of
from here?
unusual. Like we're neighbors.
Yeah, we did actually, as people saw, if they watched our episode last week, we were in the same place one day, which was
Briefly.
weird.
You said History Happy Hour spans the globe.
It does. And whatever parts of the world Chris and I are in, we try to make time on Sundays for History Happy Hour,
Indeed.
which you can see on the HHH YouTube and Facebook pages, and which is brought to you with the help and kind assistance of Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours. And a big thank you to the growing list of folks supporting this effort via
Yes.
Patreon, especially our top shelf sponsors. Chris, and who are they?
Stephen Ferber, Chris Templin, Doug McCord, Paula Ryman, Stephen Dean, Ted Moon, and Ward Cornett.
Fabulous. And I see we
Thank
have
you
people.
so much, guys.
Yes, we do appreciate that, and you're setting a good example for everybody else. and there's John Matthew. John's in Toronto too.
I know.
He's real nearby. And who else have we got watching
Xavier.
so far?
Xavier is here from sunny Spain.
Right.
Marcus, so we can officially start.
We've got folks from Oregon and Houston and Secaucus, New Jersey, Florida, all over the country and all over the world. And of course, we thank you for joining us on this Labor Day weekend. We got a great show with National History Day students and a History on the Road segment coming up at the end of the show. So
Sounds very exciting.
It's new and exciting, and so you're going to get that. So, Chris, do you think we're just about ready to go?
I think perhaps we are. Yes.
All right.
Shall
well,
I?
Why don't you give us the?
The drinking establishment is open.
You didn't want to say bar.
Well, given the.
What are you drinking? What is it, like at the coffee shop is open?
Tim Hortons.
Oh, Tim Hortons.
Can't get that in London, baby.
He's there in Toronto, Canada. Chris Anderson playing some Tim Hortons. Every year, hundreds of thousands of middle school and high school students across the country create National History Day projects based on their own research, including primary research. And they compete first at the school level, and then the regional, and then the state level, and finally, for a select few, get to go to the nationals. And just a handful of students out of those many, many that start at the bottom of that pyramid end up at the top and winning gold medals for their projects. Yeah. And today we're going to talk to 4 of those students, 4 national gold medal winners, about their National History Day student projects. And I think you'll be amazed, Chris. I think the audience will be amazed at the variety of projects and the quality of research and effort that go into them.
No, I was going to say it's a wonderful organization.
You have been involved with it, right?
Yeah, I was a reader for the competitions, and I was always really blown away by the level of scholarship and the quality of the work. And it's always nice to see young people getting involved in history. Yeah,
and so we're really happy to give a forum for that today. And our first guest today is, I have to find my right graphics here, I have so many of them, is Sasha Allen, who is a student at the Eden Prairie High School in Minnesota. And her gold medal winning project was a short documentary called Don't Believe Your Eyes, How Falsified Visual Media Built the Cult of Stalin. And I'm just going to play a very short clip from her documentary before we bring her on.
To maintain his power and cement his legacy, Stalin began publicly communicating a wildly exaggerated version of his own status. Using government artists, Stalin falsely portrayed that he had been close to and beloved by Lenin. Stalin suddenly appeared in photos and art with Lenin, despite not being there in real life. He commissioned films that falsely depicted the leaders as close, like family, so he could gain reflected glory from Lenin's memory. Staged films also showed him present at battles he was nowhere near.
Well, hey, Sasha Allen, welcome to History Happy Hour. We'll see you on the screen in a minute as soon as I figure out what I'm doing. How are you? Welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so delighted. So, the clip gives us a taste of your project, but tell us more about this project and why you chose this topic.
So, as it says in the title, my project is on how falsified visual media built the curse of Stalin. And what got me interested in the topic was a book called The Commissar Vanishes by David King, who was a British writer and historian. The book shows photos and art that Stalin falsified for his own political gain and to erase his enemies from history. I was intrigued by the altered images and the stories behind them, and was really struck by how relevant it was to today's problems with fake news.
So, Sasha, why do you think visual media is an important tool to telling the story? I mean, when we think of historians, we think of dusty archives and old letters and whatnot. So what is it about visual media that you think is important or appealing, or what drew you to that?
I think visual media really helps you be immersed in the historical story being told. It's one thing to read about an event, but it's another thing entirely to see with your own eyes.
And Sasha, we already have a question from our audience because they are so on top of this. They want to know, where did you get your hands on the footage that you used in your documentary?
Well, obviously, I couldn't go to Russia myself to find the primary source footage. So instead, I watched hours of documentaries on YouTube about Stalin and just looked through those to find the footage I needed.
So, Sasha, was there anything that you found out about Stalin that surprised you? Because I know, obviously, being a World War II historian, I've studied the Eastern Front for decades, and Stalin's a really hard character to get your hands around. So, what do you think you learned about him, or was there anything that surprised you about him?
I think the thing that surprised me most in my research was that Stalin's falsified narrative was so effective that people didn't believe he was behind all of the tragedies occurring in the Soviet Union, such as the arrests and eliminations in the Great Purge, the gulags, which were, of course, the forced labor camps, and the Ukraine famine in the early 1930s, which Stalin engineered through forced collectivization. There's an interview clip in my documentary where a man says that they believed Stalin was a saint and a god who could do no wrong. They thought, surely he must not be aware of these atrocities, and surely someone else must be behind them, and Stalin certainly could have stopped it if he knew. People were actually writing Stalin letters from the gulags, begging him to save them.
Oh, because they thought that he could intervene with the evil people who had put them there.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We're here to hear it.
In fact, sometimes these letters actually had the opposite effect of extending people's prison sentences and even drawing attention to the person's family, who were then arrested as well.
Wow. One of the things that struck me looking at your project, Sasha, it kind of kindled a memory for me, which is I was in Russia about 12 years ago, and I remember coming out of a subway station in Moscow, and there was this huge painting, and I think it went back to World War II, but it was this huge painting of Stalin, and I'm not talking life-size, it's 10 times life-size, a portrait of his face as you come out of this subway stop, and you certainly aren't going to see huge paintings of Hitler in Germany or Tojo in Japan, but whatever he did, it was so effective that it's kind of still working.
Mm-hmm. Stalin is actually gaining popularity in Russia again. A recent poll shows that 70% of Russians view him in a positive light for his World War II victories, just looking past how he caused the death of millions.
Yeah, so, you don't want to let these small things in the record kind of interfere with your image.
So, Sasha, what would you like to do with your research? Do you feel like you've reached the point where you want, or does this raise more questions for you than answers?
Well, actually, I made another documentary after this one about the Ukraine famine in the 1930s. So I would say then, yes, it did raise more questions for me just because I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Ukraine famine is something that's a truly amazing and horrifying story. You talk a little bit about the parallel between the visual media stuff that Stalin is doing, which honestly it's like, it immediately reminds you of Photoshop, right? We're placing you in, except that's the pre-Photoshop era, placing him into videos that he doesn't belong in. But we do see a lot of this going on now, and when you look at the parallel between what Stalin did and stuff that's happening in the news now, deep fake videos, fake news, etc., what do you think we can learn from that era about how to deal with it in our own era?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the topic is extremely relevant to what's going on today. You really can't automatically trust what you see. It's like the title of my documentary says, don't believe your eyes. We all need to be on guard for falsified images, do our own research, find trustworthy sources, and question the agendas of whoever has published or posted what we see or read. Visual fakes are becoming so sophisticated, and even though detection tools are improving, it's very easy to be fooled.
So one of the things that I've always been curious about, and we've asked this to some pretty famous authors on the show. They've written about some characters that are.
So don't feel any pressure.
Yeah.
Right?
No, just let me finish.
Okay.
That are pretty unpleasant. What was it like spending so much time with somebody like Stalin? Did you just kind of get tired of him, or you're like, oh my God, he's awful, and I just can't, face him anymore? Or because you're living pretty close with him as you're researching this.
Yeah, I think he was a very interesting person to study. Obviously, an awful person. But I think there was just so much to learn about him that I didn't really get tired of doing the research, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Or of, just spending so much time studying somebody who was so awful.
Mm-hmm. We were talking to the fellow who wrote the book about Russia in World War II.
Yeah. His
name is suddenly escaping me, but right,
Sean McMeekin.
Yeah, and so you have to spend so much time with somebody that after a while it's like you're living with this tragedy night and day, and you almost need to escape from it sometimes. And I should also ask you, Sasha, as you have worked on this, would you like to give a shout out to your teacher or anyone who helped you along the way with this project?
I definitely want to give a shout out to the Minnesota History Day staff. They really helped me so much, and they're incredible.
Excellent. Well, Sasha Allen, thank you so much for joining us today. So stick around for a little bit, but that was Sasha, who is her project was Don't Believe Your Eyes, How Falsified Visual Media Built the Cult of Stalin. She is the gold medal winner in the individual documentary category in high school from the Eden Prairie High School in Minnesota. So Sasha, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sasha.
And Chris, before we get to our next interview, Xavier had a question, and I thought it was really a question for you and not for Sasha. He says he wants to know who's the worst, Hitler or Stalin?
Boy, that's kind of a flip of the coin, isn't it?
There's talk about your contests there.
Yeah. Well, it's probably it's my bias from all the reading that I do and the studying that I've done, but I still think Hitler wins that race. But it's a close one. It's a real close one. And
yeah. I mean, I think it's Hitler by a whisker there.
Hitler by a whisker.
That is the worst.
Moving right along.
I think I have to resign now.
I'm just going to apologize to everyone. Really didn't.
I apologize to everyone for that. That was terrible. So our next guest today is Michelle Miao, high schooler at Talawanda High School in Oxford, Ohio. And if I have the right graphic up here, her Project was an essay, Kindling the Flame of Revolution, Communication and Committees of Correspondence in Colonial America. So let's welcome Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us
Michelle.
on History Happy Hour.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. Your project focuses on how colonial committees of correspondence laid the foundation for American democracy. And I'll bet that most of the people in our audience are only dimly aware of the existence of committees of correspondence. So what were they? Why are they important in the revolution?
So the committees of correspondence were really the groups of colonial leaders who led the charge for revolution through early examples of mass communication. So for example, they would hold town hall meetings, publish articles, and really disseminate letters to each of the towns and villages throughout the colonies. And they were kind of responsible for convincing colonists that the British people were encroaching upon their rights, and they really helped unify the 13 colonies in revolution. And these committees were made up of primarily elite men who were educated, who were doctors and lawyers, and they helped convey the spirit of the Enlightenment from Europe to the common people who normally might not have been aware of this, of certain ideas such as natural rights, for example. And just through their writing, they kind of managed to stir the popular opinion towards revolution.
So, Michelle, but these became very almost structured and formal arrangements. How do you make the leap from a bunch of well-educated, wealthy merchants writing to one another to committees that are actually using their skills with words to convince people to do something? I mean, how do you make that leap?
Right. Well, what was interesting is that a lot of the people who were involved in the committees were actually also involved with their colonial governments and houses of representatives. And a lot of them also went on to become founding fathers of the new United States. So I would say arguably the most famous or most involved committee was the Boston Committee from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And for example, this was led by Samuel Adams, who was cousin to John, and he was also a statesman and part of the House of Representatives there. And in Virginia, for example, Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry were part of the committee. So there were really a lot of revolutionaries who already had connections to the colonial governments and who would later on go to decide the course of the new nation.
So these committees, they're committees of correspondence, so they're writing to each other. And this is really kind of an early, I mean, there is no internet. There aren't really national newspapers. There's no network news. So this is really kind of a very early form of national communication, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
And so, what made you look at that? I mean, I think when most people think of the Revolution, they're thinking about Paul Revere or the Battle of Lexington or something like that. What made you look at committees of correspondence?
So that's an interesting question. So I had just finished taking AP US History, and we were studying kind of the beginnings of America, and it kind of mentioned the committees in passing, but didn't really go too much in detail. But I was kind of struck by this concept because I'm really interested in government, and I really had a real interest in exploring the foundations of communication in America, because I kind of sensed that this was the beginning of the democratic inclusivity that is so stressed in this country now. And it was kind of the root of citizenship and citizen participation. So the committees really helped set the stage for all the ideas and laws that were later put into place. So things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, etc. And so just doing a little bit of more research into the committees, I found that they were actually really interesting and perhaps as important as Paul Revere, as the battles that happened during the Revolutionary War, and kind of setting the stage for what America is today.
Well, the pen is mightier than the sword, so you
yeah.
I've heard that.
So
or the horse.
The horse. Yeah. Carefully, remember you slipped up last time. So Michelle, as you were doing this research, I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating about researching a topic is the new discoveries and things I didn't know before, or things that surprised me. Did you go into this with any preconceived notions, and did you find things that you just kind of caused you to stop and go, wow, I didn't know that, or this is unexpected, or
So I would admit that before I really started researching, I didn't know that much about the committees at all. So just learning the people that were involved, for example, Jefferson, which I didn't know that he was involved in these, and also kind of the behind the scenes role that they played. So taking a look, for example, at famous events leading up to the war. So the Boston Tea Party, for example, it turns out that for months and months before the Boston Tea Party actually took place, these committees were meeting everywhere and kind of holding town halls where citizens could express their discontent with the Tea Act, with the taxes. And really, a lot of the people in the committees were the driving voices behind organizing the Boston Tea Party. And just knowing that a lot of the famous historical events were actually in part organized by these committees was really surprising to me, because I really didn't have any other ideas of them before I started looking more into this for the project.
And, it strikes me too that this is something that Chris and I were talking about actually in Concord a week ago when we were there in the hotbed of liberty. I'm surprised they even let you in Massachusetts.
I'm in the hotbed of liberty. Right.
Yeah. But the fact that that these events, such as the Boston Tea Party and others, are not spontaneous uprisings of angry citizens. They are very organized uprisings that are planned by a small cadre of revolutionaries.
Right, yeah, I think that was another part that I kind of slowly realized as I was researching, because a lot of the time there would be definitely meticulous planning between colonial committees, and there would just be the solidarity between these small groups of men who are controlling this kind of network of communication, and just realizing that they were really in charge of things, and there was not just public sentiment that automatically rose up.
So, Michelle, one of the things about research is that it kind of leads to other questions. Are there places that you want to take your research on the committees of correspondence, or questions that you haven't quite answered yet?
I think one of the things I'd like to look at was the influences behind the men who really started leading it. So I know that a lot of them were very connected to Europe, to the Enlightenment reasoning, and I think I'd like to study the philosophy of that, such as Montesquieu's separation of powers, Rousseau's social contract, and kind of how they influenced the committee members in their approach to both convincing common colonists, I should say, to join their cause, and also just how they shaped their own view of how the government should function. And also, as I was kind of looking more into this, I found out that during the Revolutionary War, there were actually committees called secret committees of correspondence, and these committees were not domestic, but they were in charge of gauging support for the American Revolution abroad. And I think that was really interesting, so I definitely want to look more into that as well.
And you looked at, Michelle, also that some of these committees also continued to be involved after the revolution, right? That they also play a role in the adoption of the Constitution. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's right. So I think definitely... Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
No, go ahead.
No, you're yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. So I think some of the people who were involved in these committees definitely had a role in just creating the laws of the new government, but also the very structure of these committees helped lend to the new structure of the American government. So, for example, there was obviously the big debate between the two different groups on whether or not to ratify the new Constitution. And so, for example, the Federalist Papers, the pamphlet style, the spreading of the information through a pamphlet such as the papers and being published and disseminated widely to citizens, I think that was a strategy that was kind of taken from how the committees operated prior to the war.
So Michelle, obviously, what I'm about to ask, I'm a very biased in this regard, but what relevance does your research have for us now? I mean, a lot of the accusations, people say, well, history's boring and it doesn't matter and it happened yesterday. So give a shout out to history. What applications does your research have now?
So I think I was drawn to this because I think the committees really stress communication in face of revolution, in face of protest. And I think there are some pretty turbulent times happening right now, so we can draw parallels between those approaches. And actually, John Adams said that the history of the United States can't fully be written until the committees of correspondence are studied in detail. And I think this just shows that they were very influential. So the most lasting impact, I'd say, is just setting the precedent of hearing citizen voices and establishing power of the press to protest. And however imperfect our system still is now, it's just interesting to know that this past movement, which started however many centuries ago helped lead to our current moment where people can really gather, can protest, and feel that they have the right to challenge authority, which is something I think is still increasingly important today.
Well put. Do you have anybody you want to give a shout out to, a teacher or anyone who helped you along the way with your project?
Yes, I'd like to shout out to the Ohio History Day staff, first of all. They were really helpful in helping me kind of polish this and helping me develop my ideas. And I also give a shout out to my teacher, Mr. McGahey. He's my history teacher, and he was really supportive of me the whole process. And finally, I just want to give a shout out to my mom, who, like everyone else, was really supportive and just kind of really helped me moral support throughout the way. So.
Excellent. Well, great. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. That was fabulous. And Michelle's project, once again, was Kindling the Flame of Revolution, Committees of Correspondence in Colonial America. It was an essay, National Gold Medal winner. She's from Talawanda High School in Ohio. Michelle, thank you again, and we're going to remove you here, but stick around for the end of the show.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And we do have a question, Chris, from somebody asking if this research is available online to read. And I think we can make it. I think we can probably get links for all of these from people that we can send out. I'm going to ask this is going to feel so cool, Chris. I'm going to ask our producer, Lauren Collins. Can we do that? Can we get links, Lauren, to be able to send out? If not today, then at some point. Yes, says Lauren. So we're good to go there. I felt just for a moment like I was Terry Gross right there, just for the briefest moment. Okay.
But it passed.
It did. Thank goodness. Our next guest, Ella Smith, is from the Hendersonville Middle School in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and she and 3 other students created a performance piece on the Venona Project, which I've misspelled, I think, here, Lies, Ties, and Soviet Spies, so I'm going to take that right off there. And this highly classified counterintelligence program was developed in World War II by the United States Army's Signal Intelligence Service, and it led to all sorts of interesting discoveries. Before we ask Ella about this, I'm going to play a clip from this performance piece.
Your jobs will be to decode intercepted Russian communications and help U.S. intelligence identify major spies in our country today.
So we'll be decoding encrypted messages. If they're already coded, why is this operation so secret?
Well, as you know, the Manhattan Project was an extremely confidential operation. As we develop more technology like the bomb, more and more spies try to infiltrate our country to steal our technology. In other words, we need to know what they know. Can you imagine uranium and plutonium fission technology in the hands of communists?
And welcome Ella Smith to History Happy Hour. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
That was...
It's our pleasure.
It is our pleasure. And tell us about the Venona Project, which I've heard about, but you undoubtedly know a lot more about it at this point than I do. What is it and why is it important?
So the Venona Project was part of the NSA, and it was used for code breaking, especially like Soviet Union codes, and it stopped a bunch of people from getting away with espionage, such as the Rosenbergs are the most famous example.
And Ella, how did you stumble on this story?
Oh, I missed
We originally, so I originally did a National History Day project last year about the 1920s, and that was really hard to get primary sources on, and it was in England, so it was kind of hard to do research on. And so I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more modern this time, so I decided to go with the 40s, 50s, and 60s, so basically Cold War era. And we wanted to do a project about like North Carolina, because National History Day really likes it when you do a project about kind of where you live. Mm-hmm. And so we stumbled onto Jean Grabeel, and she went to college like an hour and a half away from where I live. And she was the main founder of the Venona Project. And we just started researching the Venona Project and got more and more interested in that. And we still have Jean Grabeel in the play, and that's the character that I was just playing, you could see. But our project was more about the Venona Project instead of just one person.
So this was a project that involved a lot of women, didn't it, in the code-breaking parts of this project? Not just Jean, but other women.
Yes, so the majority of the code breakers were women, but the men were in charge of them, and so the men had more stress, but the men got the credit, but the women did all of the work.
Yeah, so that's the only time that's ever happened in history, right?
So how did you go about finding out about this project? I mean, obviously, SIS and that's top secret stuff, and a lot of stuff is difficult to find. How did you run down enough information to tell your story?
So there were a lot of primary sources that had already been released because the son of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg had already sued for information about the Venona Project and about his parents. So that really helped us gather information about the Venona Project itself.
Okay. And speaking of the Rosenbergs, now of course I think probably most folks in our audience know that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed for espionage. But you say in your project that that the evidence may have suggested, in fact, that Ethel was not guilty of espionage. And tell us a little bit about that, and then sort of why that evidence might have been covered up.
Yeah, so there was a lot of evidence about Ethel being innocent. For example, the code that they decoded about Ethel and Julius, it said that Antenna, which was Julius's nickname, it said Antenna's wife, Ethel. So she had no code name.
No
and
worries.
she was, so the word in the decoding, they used the word work, and in Russian there's a lot of words for work. And it basically said that Ethel did not work for the Soviets. So Ethel did not, she didn't work. She was not involved in the espionage.
So then why was that information not, used to prevent her from being executed?
It was covered up mostly because they did not, the government did not want the Soviets to know that we had the Venona Project because it was not out yet. No one knew about it. And they would know that we had decoded their decryptions if she was not executed.
So one of the things that I'm very curious about are these women that were involved in the decoding operations. I'm not sure what exactly, you said there were a lot of primary sources that have become available. Did you come across any accounts by any of these women involved in the actual decoding? And if so, what did they think about what they were doing?
So there were actually almost zero accounts from the women themselves. Mm-hmm. They spent their entire lives hiding the fact that they were in this organization. Jean Grabeel actually did not tell anyone. It came out later in the newspaper that the Venona Project, had happened, and the women in the Venona Project were listed. And Jean Grabeel's nephew was reading off of the women and saw his aunt's name.
Oh, wow.
And that is how he found out that his aunt was part of the Venona Project.
Wow, that's amazing. And there's some parallels there on the next piece we're going to talk about as well. But is there, Ella, the Venona Project continues right up until the 80s, I want to say, and there's information Is that information all online at this point, or a huge amount of it? It seems to me I've read about this, but I'm not sure.
I think there's a lot of information about it online now. I don't think all of it is online still. I did not research really past the 60s because that's kind of where my topic ended. But I do think a lot of information has come out about the Venona Project since.
But based on what, one of the things that we always hear is about, Soviet spies, and they get all the information and they trick us, and they're winning the intelligence war. As you've done research on this project, would you say that, on the whole, we come out ahead of the Soviets in the intelligence war? I mean, does the Venona Project succeed, or are we kind of found wanting?
I think it's both ways. There is information that we have not uncovered, but we have caught a significant amount of spies, and we have done a lot with the Venona Project that was beneficial towards us. But it's really, I don't think there's one right answer to that question.
Sure.
Well played there. Well played there, Ella.
She has a future in government.
Yeah. I think you in government or in media there someplace. Well played. We have a viewer, Elaine Murray, who wants to know, why is it called Venona? Do we know?
We don't. It was just a code name that they came up with. Actually, one of our judges asked that question, and we had to look it up, and yeah, there's no reason that it's called Venona.
Well,
it's just a code name.
It's always those questions that you don't expect that are causing you, whether you're in a National History Day project or, I don't know, leading a Revolutionary War tour, that cause you a pain and agita along the way there. Ella, is there anyone that you would like to call out, to say thank you to for helping you out with this project? And maybe that also would include the other people who worked on it with you.
Yeah, so my teammates did a lot of the work. Alex researched a lot about the Cold War, and Lila and Harry both researched about the Venona itself, and they did a lot of work. And my teacher, Miss Boyette, really helped us with a lot of the stuff that we looked at.
You certainly dug into it, and I mean, aside from learning how to correctly spell Venona, I have learned other things as well from you, Ella, so thank you very much for sharing that with us, and thank you for joining us today. And stick around so you can be here at the end, and thank you, Ella Smith, and her project on the Venona Project, which was a great performance piece. And as we said with the other projects, we'll try to find a link so that we can share that with people and they can look at the whole thing themselves. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella.
And Elaine also said, is there a parallel project in Russian Spycraft? Da, Elaine, I'm sure there is, but we would have to kill you if we told you about it. So we didn't put that to Ella, figuring that probably wasn't in the center of her research there. The last of our 4 gold medal winners in History Day projects is somebody who I have to say I've gotten to know quite well over the last year, because, Chris, his project involved the Ghost Army. Caleb
You weren't
Sinwell.
one of the judges, were you?
No, I was not.
Oh, okay.
Caleb Sinwell is a student at the Nashville Plainfield Middle School. Well, he's in the high school now. And his project was a website called Ghost Army, Deceptive Communication and the Power of Illusion. I see I can still spell Ghost Army.
That's good.
And Caleb did a website on the Ghost Army. And I did work with him on it as well. And so, Caleb, thank you so much for joining us here on History Happy Hour.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
So by this time, Caleb, I have hopes that our audience does know a little bit about the Ghost Army, but maybe not everybody. So tell us a little bit about what the Ghost Army was in World War II and why it attracted your interest.
Well, That's a very good question, first of all. But the reason I was attracted to the Ghost Army is because I have a I have a long line military history in my family. My great-great-grandpa was in World War I, and then I have a great-grandpa who was in World War II. And then my grandpa, right now, he was in Vietnam. And I've just loved military history. I've always found it very interesting to me, and that's why I did the topic, the Ghost Army.
So Caleb, I also see, though, that you have a 506 pin underneath your Ghost Army pin. What's your connection to the 506?
Well, here, one second.
Yeah,
Through my studies of my topic, I have actually became great friends with a PSYOP soldier.
Oh, okay.
And he actually gifted me the pin for doing I have a photo of him that's actually in my website. I used a photo of him in my website. He is the PSYOP soldier that is sitting in a helicopter bed with the Ghost Army patch on his shoulder. That is the guy that gifted me the pin. He's having that patch on his shoulder.
Right. There was a photo that we had received. I didn't actually know exactly where it came from. It was on the PSYOP's Facebook page, and Caleb tracked. It was a soldier in a helicopter wearing this morale patch. I'll hold it up again because the more
somebody might have forgotten. The
more happy I'll be. And a PSYOP soldier, and Caleb tracked him down. Caleb did the research and tracked him down and found him. So, Caleb, your website, and we'll just show a little clip there of your website page. Your website has a bunch of different information on it about the Ghost Army. What did you find the most interesting? What did your research turn up that you didn't know about that really kind of made you excited about this topic?
Well, everything to me was very interesting because I never knew that this was a thing. I never expected this to actually happen. It sounds like something made up in a book, honestly, the reason why I didn't really know this because it was top secret for a long time. It was just declassified in 1996, which is why not very many people know about it and why we got to get the story out about it. But that's pretty much why I found it. I didn't know much about it, and it was a very interesting topic to me.
So, Caleb, where would you like to take this research? What more do you want to find out, and where would you like to go with it?
Well, through my studies, me and Rick Beyer and many other people have been lobbying for the Ghost Army Congressional Gold Medal Act, which is Bill S-1404, and I am hoping that my project can help get the Ghost Army veterans the recognition that they deserve for everything that they have done. They definitely deserve it, which is why we have been working so hard on trying to get 67 co-sponsors to co-sponsor the bill because we need to get this passed. It's an amazing thing we got to get passed.
I want to add two things. First of all, it's just a delight to be able to force Chris Anderson to ask questions about the Ghost Army, and that's.
I've got a good one coming up, so don't wait.
I won't ruin it for you. You can have as much time as you want on this, too, Chris. And the second thing is, I should mention that Caleb has been very involved in lobbying and has personally, through his efforts, I think at least 3 U.S. senators, including both U.S. senators from Iowa, have supported this bill, S-1404, the Ghost Army Congressional Gold Medal Act. And Caleb even had was it a face-to-face, virtual face-to-face with Senator Grassley?
No, that was a phone call. That was a personal phone call that we had.
Phone call with Senator Grassley. So, Caleb, the question that I would put on that is, so you have been involved not simply in doing research on a topic, but you have now become involved in sort of actively lobbying. This kind of, I'm sure that's been quite a civics lesson for you. What has surprised you or struck you about that?
That's a great question. I have found it very interesting to actually, it's a very amazing experience to talk to senators all around America. That's an amazing experience. It's amazing. I absolutely love doing it. And I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, it's just about what what has surprised you about lobbying. So, I mean, I will tell you that a lot of people are surprised with the effort that it takes to convince people to back this project. But I was just wondering what might have struck you about it.
Absolutely, I found it very interesting of how difficult it is to actually get the senators to actually listen, to get them to co-sponsor it is very difficult. The gears turn very slowly in government, and I found that very surprising. But everything's kind of interesting. Everything's always surprising. There's always new things you can learn. There's always new things that you can do. It's amazing.
So Caleb, obviously you've probably noticed this, but Rick and I are very old, so. We had the advantage.
Just putting it right out there, Chris.
Putting it right out there.
Yeah, okay.
Rick and I had the advantage of meeting the veterans that we've studied and written about. Okay, you're obviously much younger. Most of the veterans have passed. So my first question is, have you been able to meet any of the Ghost Army veterans? And my second question is, how do you research a topic like this if the participants are gone?
Well, I have not actually got to meet anybody in person, but I have had a interview. I've interviewed Senior Seymour Newsenbaum. He is a actual Ghost Army veteran member. And then I've also interviewed Liz Sales, whose dad was in the Ghost Army. So I have not actually. I had a Zoom meeting with Liz Sales, and I believe it was a phone interview with Senior Newsenbaum.
Okay.
Did you also talk to Gilbert Seltzer, Caleb? Or did that, because I know he has some audio on your website, so I thought that...
I do not think so.
Okay, so you got that someplace else. But it is still true that you're trying to research this. What did you kind of find for primary sources aside from veteran interviews?
I had other interviews other than veterans interviews. I've interviewed Rick Beyer, and I've also interviewed Dr. Christopher Hamner. They told me a lot of information, and then the Ghost Army website, the Ghost Army book, and the Ghost Army documentary gave me a lot of information about it too. Those were very helpful. And then some articles that I have found from the time period were also very helpful, and those helped me a lot as well.
So I wanted to ask, well, James, I'm going to try to call this up here. We have a question from one of our viewers, and hopefully you can take a poke at this. James wants to know, have you learned anything about how deceptive tactics have changed since World War II, or from the days of the Ghost Army?
Well, yes, I have. Like I mentioned before, my buddy, the PSYOP soldier, Maximus Aurelius, he has told me a few tricks that they do now, and then through my studies, Dr. Christopher Hamner also told me a few other tricks that they use now for deception. So back in the day for World War II, they had fully constructed rubber tanks and jeeps and everything like that, but now they just use the outline of the tanks and jeeps. So now they will use, instead of the full-blown tank, they'll just use the front of the tank and they'll blow it up so it's like a cardboard, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's more of just a flat wall just with a dummy jeep or tank painted on the front of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate, Caleb, you joining us here.
I have my last question.
So
Caleb,
please, Chris.
You can give us a diplomatic answer, but when you were doing all your research for this book, for your website, did you find any mistakes in Rick's book?
No.
Oh. Well, I had to ask.
The day is still young. He might yet find that information. So I want to just bring on everybody here who has been joined us today on the show, and bring back our guests, because it's just been so fabulous to get all of these guys here as part of this. And I want to say thank you to Caleb Sinwell, to Ella Smith, to Sasha Allen, and to Michelle Miao, and say, guys, you are awesome.
Yeah,
you are
we
awesome.
Really appreciate it.
And I think that just looking at the comments of our guests, they think that you're awesome too. And we definitely want to make sure that we can put together, and we'll put up on Facebook or in some other forum, maybe in our next newsletter, we'll put out links to all of your projects, if that's okay, so that people can really experience all of the work that you've done.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd like to do, maybe we've gotten lots of questions from our guests that we haven't had time for, so individually we might send you an email from some of our viewers with questions they have about your topics, and maybe you pop them an email back and answer their questions.
So thank you so much. Your passion is
Thanks,
exciting, and we appreciate your sharing it with us today.
Good luck, guys.
Okay, and now we're going to just take those folks out. And Chris, did I leave you there? Okay.
You did, unfortunately.
I did.
You didn't find one mistake?
Well, he's. I think he's being too nice. If you want, let's see. Do I know of any mistakes in that book? Yeah, I do. I can get it to you. I can give you that information. And we got accused of not drinking enough during the Ghost Army section, but we just say that
next week, I promise.
We didn't want to over-caffeinate Chris. so that was
it was an extra large coffee.
So Chris, you and I have both been on the road in the last
Yes.
week, and which is very exciting. So I thought it'd be fun for each of us we thought it'd be fun to share some of our travels. And you've been kind of doing some experiencing of the War of 1812.
Yeah.
So take it away. Tell us. Tell me what you saw, what we're looking at.
Well, as we crossed into Canada by the Peace Bridge in Buffalo, and we had a chance to go to Niagara Falls. And as we were at Niagara Falls, I started seeing signs for War of 1812 battlefields. And there was much begging and pleading, but my wife and daughter kindly let me visit Lundy's Lane, which is a battle I've always been really interested in. And it's where the Canadians kind of turned back the American invasion. They call it the battle that saved Canada. So it's a fascinating place to go to. It's also a very interesting look at history from through the opposition's eyes. So that's me at the Lundy's Lane.
Where else? I've got the photos here. You
Okay, we got Lundy's.
Lead me through them.
All right. So after Lundy's Lane, the next road sign I saw was for Chippewa, and that's again another battle from that campaign. That one is famous for General Scott, Winfield Scott. He was trying to push the British back. All of the men in his unit had gray coats, and that's customarily a uniform worn by the militia. But as Scott's men, they started taking fire, they weren't stopping, they kept on marching, and one of the British officers was said to comment that those were regulars by God. And so Scott cleared the field. So that's Chippewa there.
Okay. And then we have a nice statue of this gentleman.
Yeah.
I think it's not 1812 anymore.
It's not 1812 anymore. Right? This one really intrigued me. It's a statue in Toronto to the Sons of Britain, and it's a statue dedicated to those British citizens who emigrated to Canada. There was mass migration to Canada before World War I, and a good many of them, as soon as they got here, and volunteered for the Canadian Army and went back over to France. So this is a monument dedicated to all those citizens, or Canada's newest citizens who went back to Europe. It's interesting that it was built. It's also interesting because the soldiers portrayed wearing items of uniform and kit from very early in the war, so the idea is to signify that they were there. They returned right from the beginning of the war. And I thought it was a pretty moving statue.
Right.
So.
And finally...
Yeah, so that is the Fort York Armory, and right behind it is historic Fort York, another one of the fortifications that was important during the War of 1812. But the Fort York Armory was built in 1933, and as I've bored many of my guests on tours about many times, Canada has a militia system, so most of its regiments are not full-time soldiers, they're militiamen. And so at the start of the World War II, all the Toronto units mobilized at this armory and then went around the world and fought around the world. And one of my favorite units is the Toronto Scottish, so this was their drill hall and armory, so got a picture of that.
Well, I too was traveling and leading a wonderful group of people, as you know, on a Revolutionary War tour that started in Boston and then managed to get almost to the Canadian border, but not quite over, and then down to Saratoga. So we had a terrific group, and here we are in Boston by the site of the Boston Massacre, and you got to meet everybody in this
I
group.
did. It was great. I got to try to counteract your lies and misinformation.
So I'm going to leave out all of those photos. But we had a great time in Boston, and then we went up and saw the battle scene of Valcour Island, the naval battle that Benedict
one of your
Arnold
favorites.
was involved in, one of my favorites. And then at Fort Ticonderoga, I was looking around, and there in their weapons collection, I saw this collection of Highland weapons, and I thought of my friend Chris Anderson.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
And so these are all the Highland
That's
weapons
very
with
sexy.
all the Scottish soldiers involved there, especially in the French and Indian War, when the Black Watch, of course, was there, as I know you're well aware. And I thought in many ways our very last stop was one of the best ones. We visited the Marshall House just north of the Saratoga battlefield. And in this house in 1777, that Baroness Frederica Riedesel and her 3 children sort of had to shelter during a multi-day American cannonade. And Baroness Riedesel's husband, the Baron, was a general. He was one of the Brunswickers fighting with the British, and she had joined him with her 3 little children, including her youngest daughter, who was less than a year old. Really extraordinary. And the Baroness kept a journal, and it's an amazing document. And so when we were at this house, the Marshall House, we had a reenactor who basically played the role of the Baroness, speaking the words that she had written in her journal. And then afterwards, David, the owner of the house now, said, well, would you like to, this room was used as a surgery during the battle, and there are still bloodstains on the floor. Would you like to roll back the carpet and see them?
Everybody said, nah.
Yeah. And a little ripple went across the room. But here we are, we're examining. He was so generous to let us look there and look also down in the basement. I do have photos of it. I didn't put one in for the show. But in the basement where the Baroness was hiding during the worst of the cannonades, with wounded British soldiers screaming and shrieking, and she was trying to tend them and take care of her young children. And it was quite moving and quite amazing.
Yeah,
and so that was
must have been nice to be on the road again.
It was really nice, and great people, and great to get out. The weather, we had a hurricane at the beginning and a hurricane at the end, and we managed to dodge them both. So
there you go.
So we had some hot weather the first few days.
Yeah, I'd say.
Aside from that, it was really good. It was really good. And so we hope now to even learn from that, and next year we're going to hope to get all the way to Quebec.
I'll get you a map.
And into the country you are now, or the French-speaking part of same said country, and hopefully we'll use everything we learned this year to make it an even better tour. Although this year's one went really well.
Good.
So, Chris, I should ask you here. We are. It's great to be back, but we have a show next week.
We do.
And if you can remember the show, you can tell us a little bit.
Yeah,
about it.
it's we're going to be discussing the book "Forget the Alamo." It's a new, very controversial history of the Battle of the Alamo and the legend that's been built up around it. And we're going to have Brian Burrow, one of the 3 authors of the book. And just to give you a little bit of a taste, this is from the Kirkus Review. I had to read it because it was wonderful. They say the book is a zesty, journalistic, half-history, half-send-up about the Battle of the Alamo and the myths that cling to it. Burrow, Tomlinson, Stafford, all Texans succeed brilliantly in their intent. This lively book is sure to cause plenty of interesting conversations in Texas. An iconoclastic, romping, bullseye volley at an enduring sacred cow. Popular history at its most engaging and insightful.
Yeah, so that's our next week's show. And boy, and a lot of people like that book, and there's a whole lot of other people who are really, really angry about it. So what a good topic that should make.
And Rick might wear a coonskin hat, so I think
that is so not going to happen. But thank you for offering that up, Chris. And you'll be back in faraway London by that time.
I will be.
So you can approach this with a certain amount of historic distancing.
Exactly. Looking forward to it.
All right. You're going to send us away?
Oh,
Thanks for joining us today at History Happy Hour, everybody.
I think there's something we want to...
You're right. Oh, it's so right. You're so right. Oh, man.
This is why this is happening. Your forgetfulness.
It is. I'm so forgetful. But we have to say goodbye today to somebody who's been working with us all summer. Lauren Collins, who is our fabulous intern, production assistant today. She was our producer, and she has been working both on History Happy Hour and on the Ghost Army and doing an amazing job. Lauren, thank you for all your hard work on this and everything else. And finally, after 3 months, we're going to give you a chance to say whatever you want. Of course, I didn't warn you that we would give you that chance. So we'll put you on the spot, though.
Thank you so much. I do not have like a grand exit prepared, but overall, I just really wanted to thank you for this opportunity. It's been so fun to work on the show and behind the scenes on Ghost Army stuff too. Didn't end up taking over as host like I planned to, but
we would be happy to. No,
highly
really. There's always a spot. Trust us.
There's always a spot for you.
And if all of you viewers would just like to write in and tell Lauren not to leave, we'd really appreciate it.
Lauren has a busy senior year ahead of her, Chris, so we have to respect that.
Okay.
So we would welcome Lauren to stay on the team, but it's there are other opportunities awaiting her.
But she can come back anytime she wants.
She can, and she knows that. So, Lauren, thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining us.
Lauren.
Your Chris remembered you. I forgot. There you go. I don't know what we can say about that.
I'll tell you what.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Lauren, so much.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.
And Lauren's actually going to work a little for us this coming week as well, so but we don't have to mention that. Okay. Now. Let's stop this show. let's end this show.
Set it now. Put it down.
Okay. Give me the cue. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for History Happy Hour.
Stay safe, everyone.